We find the right knowledge through questions. If you ask the right questions, you can often find the right knowledge. Sometimes that exists in programmed instruction. Reg Revans, by the way, was very, very clear. Questioning insight was much more important than programmed knowledge. So what I want you to have experienced this morning so far, that in your action learning group, the focus on questions provides insight for the person in the hot chair. The hot chair gains an understanding of what knowledge they need through the questions which are posed. From the questions that are posed, that person can take actions, in which case they can go and find out by doing something and creating knowledge, and perhaps that creates itself programmed instruction, or another word for programmed instruction is codified knowledge, that knowledge which already exists in the world. He was very clear, and actually what's important to see is we can go backwards and forwards between questions and programmed instructions. Revans also had an unkind word for programmed instruction. He called it P for poppycock and P for professors. Okay? He was an academic, but he was a counter-academic. He was very skeptical of simply having someone like this at the front talking. He said that's not the way to learn. The way to learn is to let the person ask questions, find out, and actually he says be aware of experts. Be aware of experts. But don't avoid them, because experts are good if you ask the right questions. So what I want you to take from this is questions are as important, if not more important than programmed instruction. And that's what action learning is about and what you experienced so far. This is why. Now, I'm not going to read this. I'm simply going to give this idea and pull out some key words. In the world that we live in, there are different kinds of problems. Some of these problems are problems where there is definitely an answer, and we call these problems of uncertainty. A problem where we don't know something is relatively tame. A tame problem, if I pose a question, who won the Premier League in 2012, I can go onto the internet, and if I don't know the answer, I will find the answer. So problems like this are called tame problems. Most of our time we are dealing with tame problems. We are dealing with problems which have a definite answer, and it often is the case of finding out by asking someone, sending them a message by text, getting a quick answer. We call these tame problems problems of uncertainty. There are also problems which, to a greater degree, are not tame. We call these problems wicked because they are problems where we do not really know what the answer is. Sometimes we do not even know what the problem is. There are many problems in organizations to do with, let's say, pay, to do with, let's say, technology and the use of technology, to do with change in organizations. Change in organizations is mostly ineffective. 40% to 50% for big change, and the research shows that. Why? Because we treat it as a tame problem when really it is a wicked problem. Now, wicked does not mean very good. If you go to the UK at the moment and you say to a child, it's a wicked problem, he or she thinks you've got a very good problem and a very funny problem. Because young people are using the word wicked to mean very good. I'm using the word wicked in a traditional sense, which means it's very, very troubling. Okay? we might have to change the word. Language moves, by the way, doesn't it? So this isn't wicked, this is wicked, horrible, not nice. Wicked problems are also problems of what one writer calls equivocality. It's equivocal because it means there are different people with different opinions. Different people with different opinions. Culture is not single, it is different people with different opinions. Telling different stories. Taking actions on different stories. Sometimes in a very, very difficult and horrible way. In the world that we live in, we have a world full of wicked problems. If we go to, I suggest, Syria at the moment, that's a wicked problem, which we're trying to treat as a tame problem. It's not, it's a very wicked problem because it's causing people to die. If we go to other parts of the world, like Nigeria, for example, that's another wicked problem. But in organizations, I want to keep it to the level of organizations, we have to use an appropriate way of considering the problem in order to make changes. Now, the quotation here is from a writer called Donald Shon. I won't go through it now, but what he kind of talks about is the idea of the swamp. You find the difficult problems when you try to find what problems are messy and confusing. Messy and confusing and wicked problems is like living in a swamp. I don't think you have swamps in Dubai. It's far too dry. But we have swamps in the UK. Swamps is a life where you don't know where you're going and what you're doing. So crucially, what you have to do is you have to ask the right questions. Posing questions, from the position of posing questions to take action, you can then possibly move to the high ground. So this metaphor, again, is very useful. Here's another idea which kind of says the same thing. Problems can go from being known and unknown, and solutions can go from being known and unknown. We are concerned with the bottom right-hand corner, complexity, wicked, and mess. Okay? So I won't go through this either, but this is a good way of understanding where action learning lies traditionally. And this is what it's like. Can you see the idea that you have been through? Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. Imagine they are sitting on your table. Imagine they are sitting on your table. Okay? There is one person who is in the hot seat. Can you see the person in the hot seat? That person has said, I am facing a difficult problem. Please help me. Please help me find out what to do next. But notice, the group are there helping and supporting. They're holding him up. They're providing the support. And there's a person at the bottom who is going to measure the results. So can you see that this is a little bit like action learning, because what's going to happen next is this person is going to take action. And this person will find out what happens. Because until they take the action, there is no learning. So perhaps you could predict what happens next, but he doesn't know yet. And the lady who talked about taking a risk, yeah, you get the same idea here. You're taking a risk with yourself so that you can help others take a risk. This little slide, I think, captures very well the image of action learning. And it goes with ideas on the learning organization. I'm really not going to go through this because this is like reading out a list. This is codified knowledge, and if you want to read the article, I can put the article in Dropbox if you ask me to. It's very easy to do. Okay. So, implementing action learning. At one level, action learning, level 1, is about making change to try out and learn. Simple level 1 learning that we have an idea, we try it out, we gain experience from trying it out, it's a real experience, and then we reflect and share. So, what you have done this morning is you simply have arrived at a new idea. I have no evidence yet that you have tried anything out. So what we have, unless you tried it out in the coffee break. So if in the coffee break you made some phone calls based on the action you agreed in your group, then you are already in the trying out stage. And therefore you can say that you've had a real experience. So the real experience is you recognize that you have tried something out. That's you've taken action. You've seen what's happened. And of course what we still have to do is reflect and share. I've shown you already a good way of reflecting and sharing is to write it down and talk about it. Write it down and talk about it. This is another word for this, is a learning log of some kind. So reflecting and sharing is a crucial. You have to complete the cycle for action learning to be called action learning. Now, I also said to people, for example, on this table, I said to them, why don't you ladies meet in 6 weeks' time and talk about what you've done? And they said to me they live in different emirates. So I then said, well, why don't you all agree in 6 weeks' time to meet in Abu Dhabi? It's not difficult to get from Dubai to Abu Dhabi or anywhere else in the Emirates. Why don't you meet for the morning in Cafe Nero in Abu Dhabi? If there is one, but there is one. Okay. I am a fanatic for Cafe Nero. I am one of Cafe Nero's most loyal coffee drinkers. Why don't you meet for 2 or 3 hours as a group of 6 and talk about what you've done? And they didn't tell me whether they would or wouldn't yet. I will see at the end of the session if they will. But crucially, what becomes important is that it becomes important for you to agree to review and reflect on your learning so that you can find the next new idea. So you can see action learning becomes continuous. My recommendation, you need to meet at least 3 times. 3 times before it becomes embedded. If you meet 3 times, you will want to meet a 4th time, a 5th time, a 6th time, and sometimes you will meet. The longest existing action learning set I know of is 21 years. 21 years. It was revitalized every 6 to 7 weeks with a meeting, and it was a group of business people who used to meet on each other's premises. So it becomes possible. I run 3 action learning sets that have been operating for 3 years. 3 years. One of them is a CIPD action learning set. The other 2 are with small business managers. Well, they're small business owners, and that makes it really interesting. So what I think is so important is we simply follow this process. Of course, one of the greatest things we get from action learning is not just learning. We learn to do things better. We learn to make changes. We learn to improve. And what starts to happen is you go through the same process from the real experience, which you reflect and share. You then get a new idea. Notice how the cycle has just gone upside down. But the new idea from within the group, after reflecting and sharing, is a change in practice. Trying something very different, perhaps something radical. And it comes from within the group. And here you try to improve, to do things better. Now, supposing you can get different groups of action learning sets in the same organization, this is what starts to happen. You get this. Now, don't try and understand it because it looks confusing. The only thing I really want you to understand is the bit in the middle, which is the red. This is a real example from an organisation in the UK called Merseycare. Merseycare is part of the health service in the UK. It is a big organisation. 8 years ago, it faced very difficult problems, and it was not operating very well. They recruited a new assistant director. The assistant director had a doctorate, not in medicine, not in health. She had a doctorate in action learning. She came from Salford University. Her name's Mandy Chivers. She's a great friend of mine. She tweets me every 2 or 3 hours. Do you have Twitter in the UAE? Okay. If I were to look at my phone now, there will be a tweet from Mandy. She's inveterate as a tweeter. Okay. But Mandy started action learning in Merseycare with the red group. I don't know if you can read it. It says, the core group. The core group. So this core group came together as a group of 6 people, and they did action learning for a period of time, about a year. And what they started to do, they then started, as you can see, it says Mandy, Marion, Steve, and Marion. So the Mandy into the top left-hand corner is another action learning set created by Mandy with another group. So then she had 2 groups that she was connected to. But also, Marion, who is part of the core group, also started an action learning set. So what starts to happen, as you can see gradually, they start to create connected or satellite action learning groups. After about 4 years, these were in place. And what really changed was they were tackling the difficult problems. So Merseycare went from a low-performing organisation to a high-performing organisation and became one of the exemplars of good practice in healthcare in the National Health Service of the UK. So one of the most beautiful things about this, and this is a case study which I know has a lot more to it than simply the picture, is you have a great example of how action learning can create organisation learning and change in the business. And that Merseycare still operates like this, and Mandy is still the assistant director, although she has resisted becoming the director. She said, I always want to be the assistant director because I can do more. And as a consequence, what she meant was more like this. So for me, this is a wonderful case study from the UK. Here's another one. This problem is a problem from one of my doctorate students in Nigeria. His problem is to actually promote good governance, corporate governance in Nigeria. What he knows is that in Nigeria, which is a very fast-growing African economy, it is supposed to be the biggest African economy at the moment, but it has its own problems. One of its big problems is corruption in business, and that means a failure of corporate governance, What he knows is that the model of corporate governance does not work. The model is a Western model promoted by the World Bank. The World Bank has told them what kind of governance model, and it is based on principles developed in the US and the UK. It does not work. This was his problem. So the Nigerian firms do not use transnational institution principles in their organizations. So he's trying to sort this out. He's trying to work on this. So he set some questions. Notice he's doing a doctorate, but he's using action learning to do the doctorate. These are the questions. The aim to make the TNI model more relevant in the context of Nigeria. He's not looking to radically get rid of the TNI model. That's the World Bank model. He's trying to make it more suited to Nigeria. He's trying to put culture of Nigeria into the model. And so what he does, he says, look, if we don't do this, we won't get foreign direct investment, and we won't get rid of the corruption. So what is he doing? Well, he's using what's called action learning research. Action learning research. What is he doing? He is using action learning to create knowledge. He works with an action learning group in Nigeria who provide him with the knowledge by agreement, because you can't do it unless there is agreement and trust. This group is a group of directors who want to work on improving practice. So they themselves have an interest in changing practice and developing something radically different to what they have. And they are willing to share findings, and they adopt the methodology to develop the model. His particular methodology, I won't take you through, but there are people in the room who will be able to talk about grounded theory. Grounded theory. That is a theory which works from the bottom up. A theory which works from the bottom up. This is what it looks like. I will not explain it, because but you can ask me for a paper which was delivered at a conference, which is due for publication, which tells you more about this. If you ask me for it, I will put it in the Dropbox. But what's important is that all of this is based on the finding. This is the knowledge that is being created on corporate governance from an action learning group over 5 meetings. Over 5 meetings, this is what was produced. You can see all sorts of interesting notions there which he has introduced, but the most important one is at the top, which is reputational risk management. I'm not going to explain that, because that would require another conference. But crucially, what was important is about this particular idea in how to become a better board of directors in Nigeria. So my example here is really to show you what you can do with an action learning group. This is at a country level. At a country level. In 3 weeks' time, I'm going to Nigeria to work with the government and the Society for Corporate Governance. We will start with this, because we are going to create, through action research and action knowledge, action learning, a new corporate governance structure for Nigeria. So I think this is fantastically important for what's going on in the world. Okay, we're going to move in a different direction now, and this is where I'm going to bring you back in. I'm going to move now to what is called positive action learning. What I've just explained to you and what you practiced was traditional action learning. What you're going to now experience is positive action learning. Do you remember the positive stories of really good work practice you talked about at the start of the day? Do you remember this? You're going to make use of them. Okay? So you're going to talk again, but you're going to be happy. We're going to stop being miserable, interested in wicked problems, wicked meaning nasty, not wicked meaning happy. Okay? You're going to talk about what works. I call this positive action learning, or PAL, P-A-L. Now in English, PAL means friend. If I said, Hilal is my pal, it means he's my friend. Now I'm advised that in Arabic you know the word pen pal. Yes? Okay. Pen pal means writing to someone who is a friend. Okay? Positive action learning, pal. Okay, keep the connection. And it's based on something called appreciative inquiry. Here's a little bit of understanding. When we focus on problems in organizations, when we focus on problems, we are focused on deficiency. A focus on problems is a focus on deficiency. When we focus on what's not working, to put it right, we're focusing on deficiency. When we do that quite a lot, we don't feel good. It's sometimes unpleasant. And actually we avoid we try to fix the problems quickly, quick fix mentality, or we avoid the serious problems. Avoid the serious problems. Culture, for example, is a serious problem if it won't change. What we're going to do is show you how positive action learning contributes to strength and virtue. Strength and virtue. Because we're going to appreciate what is working. And you're going to see what that does. You don't know what it does until you try it out. Okay? So trust me, this works. And I will show you how I've been working in the UK on this kind of project with different organizations, and we're getting some amazing results. What happens is we get a movement in the direction towards what we call extraordinary. Extraordinary. Not ordinary, extraordinary. Let me just show you this little story to finish off my session. I worked with a company in the UK, which actually is American-owned and a very well American-owned business. I'm not going to tell you who they are because that would be letting go a little bit of a secret. But they're a UK-based owned company, US-owned company, and they design and produce a well-known product. Design and produce a well-known product. They have a lot of people who are creative in the business, but in 2008 production fell around 15%, and that was due to the recession, because they are high-value producers as well, and they've made 15% of people redundant, and in the last 2 years they've still made people redundant. So what we needed, we needed to redirect. The business is very traditional, and the culture is very traditional. Some people have worked for the business for 30 years. So what was needed was a redirection, and it required this shift in culture, even though the staff were being made redundant. So this is what we did. Oh, sorry, gone the wrong way. Sorry. We formed a positive action learning group. Now this positive action learning group became our champion group. They were 5 people chosen by the organization development manager. It included 1 senior manager, it included 1 production manager, and it included 2 supervisors. So it was 5 people who were very positive about change and wanted to change the business. So they became the champion group, and they became people who did action learning and appreciative inquiry. And the way they did appreciative inquiry was to do exactly what you've just done, only they didn't interview just 1 person, they interviewed 10 people each. 10 people each. And they did this over a period of time. And what they found when they analyzed the data was they needed to do more. And this is entirely in tune with the appreciative inquiry approach. Because once you discover, you then have to dream about what to do, and then you have to design what you have to do. And this is what they designed. They designed that each of them would take the lead in forming another positive action learning group. Now, what's important about this process is what you probably have found. When you talk to people about positive work, they feel good about it. They like it. The important point about appreciative inquiry, it is the interview which is a conversation which changes what is happening in the business. The conversation itself, because if someone has a positive conversation with someone else, guess what they do? They go and talk to other people about their positive conversation. And if they can see their positive conversation is feeding into the change in direction of the business, you are engaging in that positivity in order to create energy. So what began to happen was that the 5 people initially the champion group met 4 times in 6 months. 4 times in 6 months. They then got together 20 other people, and they said to them, do you want to join our group? And at the end of the meeting, I asked them to put their hands up. Do you want to join? And all 20 put their hands up. It was fantastic. Suddenly we had energy in the room of 20 people wanting to join a positive action learning group. This group is now meeting on an ongoing basis. And this is what will happen, I hope, in about 4 months' time, that each group will set up another group, only they will be much more informal and they will be closer to the front line of the business. Because this is where coaching will come into play, and we will create these groups as coaching groups. But we will do the same process. We will collect data in order to create a better business. Now, what I found was when we started the program, we created these indicators of negativity. Can you see what happened? We do not have a common understanding of what the true issues are. These were all collected from the employee survey of the business. The survey produced negative comments. We use these as benchmarks, so the figures on the right-hand side should be seen as movements from the position of 0. And this is the position after 6 months that the group started to see they were progressing against their own benchline. Now, our next step is to use the same dimensions in order to make further progress. Now, I'm beginning to see, because I'm getting people coming to me to ask me to do this, that we are going to start, I have another project about to start with the police force in the UK, in a particular part of my country. I know there will be negative indicators at the start. But the first thing that we will do is form the champion group, and they will learn to use positive action learning. We collect the data, and we see what changes we will make. And this really, for me, is the future of where we need to go. So what I hope you've seen is that through action learning, I hope you can see, because this is where I finish, you can be traditional with the problems that are wicked. There will always be wicked problems to be traditional about. But actually, the real future for me is future movement engaging in people's energy about what is working and what they value and what they want to see happen. If you can engage in that using action learning, you will transform the world. And with those comments, I will end my morning. Thank you.